Oh my gosh, Bill. What a story. I mean, that's why guys, they're making a movie out of it. So basically, You think he would have been right next to Saturday all those years protecting Peyton?
Absolutely, no question about it.
Brandon Burlsworth.
Brandon Burlsworth.
Brandon Burlsworth. You've probably heard the name Brandon Burlsworth.
Who is Brandon Burlsworth? He had defied every odd. A small-town nobody with big dreams, he clawed his way from the bleachers to the brink of NFL glory. What happens when the ultimate feel-good story becomes the ultimate tragedy? How does a young man go from being on top of the world to become a trophy overnight without playing a down in the NFL? This is an emotionally charged journey of hard work, true grit, and destiny. Perhaps the most tragic NFL story you've never heard. How does someone make a team? This is about how a young man's faith and work ethic inspired everyone around him, and how a single moment shattered it all. Keep watching, because by the end, you might just question how such a tragedy could even happen to someone that did everything right. Brandon said, "I am gonna be a Razorback, even if I have to walk on." In Arkansas, college football is a way of life. The Razorbacks have a proud tradition, and their fans expect it on the field every Saturday. Enter a quiet, chubby kid from the small town of Harrison, Arkansas. 17-year-old Brandon arrived on campus without a scholarship, a walk-on determined to earn his spot. He had been an all-state lineman at a tiny high school, but bigger schools didn't believe in him. He turned down smaller college offers because his heart was set on playing for the Razorbacks, even if it meant doing it his own way. Wearing thick, black-framed glasses that looked straight out of the 1950s, Brandon didn't exactly look the part of a star athlete. At 6 foot and around 200 pounds as a high school senior, he was considered undersized. Coaches told him he'd need to bulk up to compete in the conference, so Brandon arrived on campus about 245 pounds, all fat. Teammates laughed at the walk-on with Coke bottle glasses, doubting he could ever make the team. Classmates didn't know what to make of a college kid who never cursed, never drank, and never smoked. You see, Brandon was different. He was Christian, unfailingly polite. Everything was yes sir, no sir with him, and he had a work ethic like no other. Where others saw an awkward kid out of his depth, Brandon saw an opportunity to prove everyone wrong through sheer determination. He redshirted in 1994, spending that first year on the practice squad getting knocked around by bigger, faster players. But instead of getting discouraged, Brandon transformed himself. He attacked the weight room and the dining hall. First, ballooning over 300 pounds as coaches had asked, then realizing that weight needed to be muscle, not fat. By his second year, he trimmed down to a lean 260 pounds, then steadily built himself back up to a rock-solid 300 pounds of muscle. The coach's jaws dropped when Brandon returned looking like a formidable 300-pound offensive guard. Brandon wasn't blessed with natural superstar talent. He built himself into an athlete through old-fashioned hard work. More importantly, he approached every practice, every drill, every classroom assignment with the mindset of doing things the right way. He was a man of routine and rules. He never cut corners. In the locker room, if a coach said, "keep things neat," you'd soon find Brandon quietly picking up stray gum wrappers and cups when no one was watching. It earned him a kind of respect from teammates who started to realize this guy was dead serious about excellence in everything he did. By 1996, that seriousness paid off. Brandon had muscled his way into a starting guard spot on the Razorbacks' offensive line and, incredibly, earned a full scholarship. The former walk-on had now won over the locker room. And before his junior season in 1997, he was voted one of the team captains. And Brandon delivered. He became a dominant blocker, plowing holes for running backs and protecting his quarterbacks with tenacity. In both 1997 and 1998, he earned first-team All-SEC, asserting himself as one of the conference's best offensive linemen. And in 1998, Brandon was selected as a first-team All-American, the first Arkansas Razorback to do it in 6 years. Off the field, he was just as exceptional. Brandon carried a 3.4 GPA, made the honor roll every year, and even managed to complete his MBA before his college eligibility was up, becoming the first Razorback ever to finish a master's degree before playing his final game. He was the ultimate coach's dream. Talent made from hustle, brains matched with brawn, and a heart of gold. By the end of that 1998 season, Arkansas football was on a high. The Razorbacks won a share of the SEC Western Division title and earned a spot in the Citrus Bowl. And Brandon, the once ignored walk-on, was the driving force. In the Citrus Bowl on January 1st, 1999, he played his last college game, finishing a college career that was nothing short of storybook. The chubby kid in horn-rimmed glasses had transformed into a 6'3", 308-pound All-American and a team leader. The stage was set for the next chapter of this underdog story, the NFL. Before we continue, if you appreciate deep dive sports videos like this, smash that subscribe button. Ensures you won't miss out on our action-packed stories in the world of sports. Brandon's on-field dominance and off-field character made NFL scouts sit up and take notice. His family and faith always came first over his second love, football. Once his college days were over, he was invited to the 1999 NFL Scouting Combine, a place where long-shot dreams often fail. But Brandon was determined to shine, and shine he did. At 308 pounds, he astonished observers by running the 40-yard dash in just 4.88 seconds, the fastest of any lineman that year. He bench pressed 225 pounds for 28 reps. This big man even had shocking athleticism. He could grab a basketball rim and dunked with both hands without running. Suddenly, NFL coaches who might have written him off realized this guy is the real deal. One scout said Brandon Burlsworth seemed too good to be true. Except Brandon wasn't a throwback. As he put it, he was the future. On April 17th, 1999, Brandon's NFL dreams came true. With the 63rd overall pick in the third round of the NFL draft, the Indianapolis Colts selected Brandon. The Colts were a team on the rise, led by a young Peyton Manning at quarterback, and they needed help protecting their star. Within days, Brandon headed to Indianapolis for the Colts post-draft rookie minicamp. Any fears that the jump from college to pro might intimidate him were long gone. Brandon impressed the Colts coaching staff from the get-go. In just a few practices, Brandon's no-nonsense work ethic and talent won over his NFL coaches and new teammates. From coaches to fellow rookies, everyone could tell Brandon fit right in. The Colts had found a gem. The plan was that Brandon would likely be the starting right guard when the season began, protecting Manning and opening holes for Indianapolis' new first-round running back, Edgerrin James. Think about that for a second. From a walk-on who literally had to beg for a locker at Arkansas, to just a few years later being penciled in as a day one NFL starter. It was the definition of a dream. Back home in Arkansas, Brandon remained the same humble guy, despite his new NFL status. After minicamp wrapped up, he returned to Fayetteville in April 1999. The Razorbacks were holding a ceremony to present the team's rings for their 98 season SEC West title, and Brandon was invited as a recent alum. But true to his character, Brandon politely skipped the ring ceremony. Why? Because it was a Wednesday night, and he had more important plans. He wanted to get back to Harrison to have dinner with his mom, Barbara, and attend the Wednesday night church service with her. That was Brandon in a nutshell. Faith and family first, accolades second. With his NFL career just weeks from starting, he wasn't about to change who he was. He got into his white Chevy sedan on Wednesday, April 28, 1999, and set off on the 2-hour drive through the Arkansas hills back to his hometown, looking forward to a home-cooked meal and church with Mom. Brandon Burlsworth had survived years of grueling practices, brutal games in the SEC, and the cutthroat scrutiny of the NFL draft. He had finally reached the mountaintop, but as he drove home that evening, an unexpected, terrible turn of events was just around the bend, one that would shatter all the hope and excitement in an instant. What happened next would turn this triumph into tragedy and leave an entire state asking, why him? April 28, 1999. Dusk was falling over the winding 2-lane highways of the Ozark Mountains. Brandon's car navigated the familiar route from Fayetteville to Harrison, a drive he had made hundreds of times during his college years. Up and down the rolling hills, past small towns and farms. He was just 15 miles from home, almost close enough to smell his mom's cooking, almost in time for church. But on this day, Brandon wouldn't make it on time. He would never make it home. At approximately 4:30 p.m. that evening, on a stretch of Arkansas State Highway near the town of Alpena, tragedy struck. The details would later be pieced together by state police and witnesses. Brandon's car drifted across the center lane into oncoming traffic for unknown reasons. Coming the other way was a gigantic 18-wheeler truck. Brandon swerved at the last second and clipped the tractor-trailer's left fender. Then, ricocheting from that glancing blow, his car veered back into its lane. His sedan, out of control, crossed the center line once more. At that exact moment, another semi-truck was coming from the opposite direction. The two met head-on. In an instant, the car was crushed by the full force of a massive truck. The impact was devastating, so violent that the car was knocked back about 160 feet down the highway. The collision obliterated the front of the vehicle. By the time first responders reached the scene, there was nothing to be done. Brandon Burlsworth was pronounced dead at the scene of the crash. He was only 22 years old, taken away not by a missed block or a bad decision, but by a twist of fate on an ordinary drive. He had planned to take his mother to church that night and enjoy a quiet dinner together. When news of the accident broke, it was like a dagger to the heart of everyone who knew Brandon. How could it be true? Burlsworth's death left people in Arkansas in shock and asking questions that will remain unanswered, one writer noted, capturing the state's disbelief. This was a young man who did everything right. Never drank, never sped, always wore his seatbelt, and indeed, he was wearing his seatbelt that day and was observing the speed limit. It seemed cosmically unfair. The ultimate good guy, the careful, responsible role model, gone in a random, brutal accident. For the Indianapolis Colts organization, who just 11 days earlier were celebrating drafting him, the news was equally devastating. In the span of a week and a half, they had grown to love Brandon's presence. One Colts official said it felt like a member of the family was lost in that crash. Remember, this was the spring after Peyton Manning's rookie year. The Colts were a young team building something special, and Brandon was supposed to be a big part of that future. Now, suddenly, he was gone before he ever played a single NFL down. Arkansas head coach Houston Nutt, who had become extremely close to Brandon in the player's senior year, was tasked with breaking the news to the Razorback team. Grown men, his former teammates, cried like babies upon hearing it. One of Brandon's college teammates, defensive lineman Sasha Lancaster, voiced what many felt. If God ever made the perfect person, it was that guy. To them, Brandon truly had been that good. On the field, but even more so off of it, which made the loss all the more difficult to comprehend. The question hung heavy in the air. Why Brandon? Why someone who seemed to have so much to live for, who had overcome so much, and who made everyone around him better? The entire state of Arkansas went into mourning. Local radio stations and news broadcasts devoted hours to Brandon's journey, trying somehow to find meaning in the senseless. Brandon's miraculous underdog journey had met a tragic, premature end on that April day, and no one could quite believe it. Brandon's funeral was held on May 2nd, 1999, in the Harrison High School gymnasium, the only venue in his hometown big enough to hold the crowd, and even it overflowed. Thousands of people attended. They came to pay respects to the local boy who had become a symbol of everything good in sports and in life. Many of the Colts players and staff who had met Brandon, including Coach Howard Mudd, traveled to Arkansas to honor him. Colts President Bill Polian himself stood up to speak during the service. Fighting back tears, Polian praised Brandon's character and reiterated how excited the franchise had been to have him. As a gesture, the Colts brought Brandon's brand new NFL jersey, blue with the number 66 and Burlsworth across the back, and presented it to his mother Barbara at the service. Since Brandon never signed a contract, this wasn't an official roster number, but the team wanted him to have a place among them in spirit. It was a heartbreaking sight, a promise of what could have been. Perhaps the most powerful tribute came from Arkansas coach Houston Nutt, who delivered the eulogy. Coach Nutt recounted humorous and inspiring stories of Brandon's time at Arkansas. How Brandon would be the first person in the football facility every morning, often even beating the coaches there at 6 a.m. How after a tough loss one Saturday, Nutt found Brandon alone on the practice field the very next night, working on his blocking technique by himself. Nutt's voice cracked as he spoke of Brandon's unwavering faith and preparation in all facets of life. He told the crowd that Brandon even seemed spiritually prepared for a moment like this. In his eulogy, Nutt said, "He worked hard and was prepared for everything in his life. He was even prepared for this." He was laid to rest in his hometown soil, but the impact of his life was only beginning to be truly understood. Razorback and Colts organizations both immediately set about honoring Brandon's memory. At the University of Arkansas, they retired Brandon's jersey number 77, only the second football number ever retired in school history. His locker in the Razorbacks locker room was permanently encased in glass, preserved exactly as Brandon left it, as a shrine to his legacy. Anybody who walks through that locker room can see his neatly hung jersey, his old cleats, even his thick black-rimmed glasses sitting there, a daily reminder of the standard he set. In Harrison, the town renamed its youth athletic center the Brandon Burlsworth Youth Center just weeks after his passing. And in Indianapolis, the Colts made sure Brandon would not be forgotten. That fall of 1999, all Colts players wore a small decal on their helmets with the initials BB in white letters on a black background, a quiet tribute that traveled with them to every game. Even though Brandon never played a down, the Colts considered him one of us. In their eyes, he was already a player. Media coverage of Brandon's story spread nationwide. Sports Illustrated ran a special feature titled Almost Perfect, reflecting on how Brandon had dedicated himself to flawless effort and character. The Associated Press, ESPN, and newspapers around the country told the tale of the greatest walk-on who never got to play in the NFL. But perhaps the most meaningful legacy was what Brandon's own family did next. In the fall of 1999, just months out of his death, the Burlsworth family established the Brandon Burlsworth Foundation. They knew what Brandon's post-NFL plans had been. Despite contract offers and potential fame, Brandon had told his family that he wanted to use some of his NFL money to help underprivileged kids, especially those who lacked the resources to pursue their dreams. So the foundation was built around the principles Brandon lived by. Houston Nutt offered a motto that encapsulated Brandon's ethos: do it the Burles way, which he defined as doing the right thing even when no one is looking. That phrase became the foundation's slogan and guiding principle. More than 2 decades have now passed since that tragic day, and Brandon Burlesworth's legacy has only grown. In Arkansas, he's achieved a near mythic status, the patron saint of walk-ons, a symbol of what hard work can achieve. Every new Razorback recruit learns about Brandon when they set foot on campus, and learn what doing it the Burles way means. Doing things right, even when nobody's watching. If you thought this story was emotional, check out this one.